Everybody, welcome to the broadcast today. And thank you all for coming. It's going to be, I think, a really, really insightful broadcast for you today. You know, purpose is perhaps the most important philosophical relationship we have to profit, business, and life. And it's an abiding belief that we're sort of right now at the beginning of a fundamental shift of the way we communicate on this planet. And this is really a great ideal and a great idea. And consumers who will continue to be more empowered, more in control of what they see, more able to spread ideas and bring their own voice to brands' potential and honesty to our lives in every dimension. Ethos rules the future. And today, Jeff Harder is coming to speak with us, and he's going to talk about this in a very different way than I think perhaps you all know about. He's the group creative director for Boston Consulting Group's Bright House, and he's joining us to share how this lateral thinking and radical creativity that they create makes exciting strategic paths and emotional connections with their clients, helping them solve some of the really big challenges for change. And their clients include Daimler, Delta, Emory University, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, NCR, the North Face, P&G, Stanley Black & Decker, Always, the Home Depot. For a quarter of a century now, companies have been turning to Bright House to excavate true business purpose and fully activate and embed that purpose throughout their organizations, embracing corporate purpose, all the while enhancing performance of top and bottom lines while unlocking growth and profits. And so you're going to hear about that today from Jeff, and how they attract, how they retain, how they energize employees and achieve social impact and inspiring customers. So Jeff, we're going to turn it over to you. Thanks so much for coming in today.
Awesome. Thank you, Hank. And thank you, Stephanie. And thank you, Pippa. I really appreciate the opportunity to get to share more about what Bright House does and why we do it, and a little bit of the how. And then, of course, I'll share a couple stories and some cases, and then save some time for Q&A at the end. So we'll get started. For me, what's interesting is, my background. A lot of people always ask you, like, how the hell did you get where you are? And for me, the initial thing was, I started off with a family across the US, but especially in these three states. And so spent a lot of time in California, Texas, and Arkansas. Those are my roots. But the big thing I always learned from family was, you got to get out there and see more. And I have a father who travels nonstop around the world. So that kind of led and sparked a lot of the desire to get out there. And so that's what led me to come out to Georgia, to be a bulldog, to see something different, and of course to have a different vibe and a different inspiration at my fingertips. From there, what's interesting is I came into Atlanta and got started at Gray, and worked, from there, going from a big shop to a small shop, which is Blue Sky, but getting a lot of variety. And I think what I learned very early on in my career was you've got to get out there and get that mix. So you don't get pigeonholed, so you don't become that person that's known for one thing. So Gray, I was doing telecom. Blue Sky, I went and worked on 5-6 clients, including sports, which was really powerful. And then I went to J. Walter Thompson and got to work on some bigger clientele, bigger budgets, productions, which I just loved. And then from there, I made the move over to Ogilvy. And that was the job I had always wanted. When I got there, sadly, it was that case of, it went back to the beginning of, like, we want you to just do hotels. I was like, I feel like there's something happening here. And what's interesting is, in between, I freelanced to Bright House. And so I got a little bit of the flavor of it and got to see what it is. And it was smaller then. And so then I went and worked at LBI as well and did some digital. But I had a great conversation with our leader, Kathy, who's now the head of North America. And I knew from that moment when I was at Ogilvy, standing there going, gosh, I don't want to do hotels forever. How can I use my skills in a better way? And so that's what brought me into Bright House. So the interesting thing there is I joined 7 years ago, and Bright House was a much different place than it is now. We were acquired by BCG 5 years ago. So at the 20-year mark, Bright House sells to BCG. And, initially it was like, what does that mean? And I think all it's done is really, truly establish that we are a global creative consultancy, but focused on purpose. And so when we go to clients, We're very fortunate that Bright House can get its own work, that BCG can bring us work or make introductions. And then there are other times when we do work and then it's best for BCG to continue on with that work. So the formula is always, moving around, but what I love is that it brings tons of variety and lots of work around the world, and very meaningful work. And that was the big difference. That was what I was lacking. I think it took a while to step away from Ogilvy, the job I had always wanted, to then come to Bright House and go, you know what, now it makes sense. I love doing meaningful work with that impact. But of course, the huge part is that's based on a really clear strategy. And so that's the thing here at Bright House is our formula is that it's 50% creative, 50% strategy. And so that's where the difference is. It's not a little moment of strategy and then the rest is done by creative. It's that strategy is throughout. So speaking of the strategy, this is just our framework of how we look at purpose. The only reason I'm going to bring it up for a hot second, and you're probably not wanting to see a framework, I totally get it. But if you were in our office today, hopefully, you'd probably be wearing a mask and sanitizing your hands a lot. But what you'd also be doing is seeing this on our wall. And this Aristotle quote has been with Bright House since the very beginning. And that is the intersection of your talents and the needs of the world, where those intersect is the purpose. And that's what we do, is to excavate and uncover it in each company we work with. Sometimes they're a development, sometimes they're an organization, sometimes they're a nonprofit. But no matter what, we're always going to do the deep research, the rigor, to uncover what makes them unique, what they can then serve in the world, and then making sure that that purpose is abundantly clear. And then to, Hank's point earlier, then we have to activate and embed it. So the examples I'm going to take you through in a second are going to show you how important it is to activate, that it can't just be, hey, that's a really nice line. Okay, now what? And that's my thing. I always put my cap on of like, hey, what's next? What is this company going to now do with that purpose? How are they going to live it? And that's where the energy really comes in. And sometimes, back to the consulting word I said earlier, Bright House works for a brief period of time with clients. Sometimes those things perpetuate and continue on longer because of our work. And that's a huge honor to the people who work hard here to get us more work and have it keep adding on more. And that's excellent. But there are also times when the company can only afford us for a short period of time. And those are the moments where I want to make sure that we equip them the very best that we can in that short period of time. And so that's where some of the examples you'll see in a minute may come to life soon, may come to life in a while. You just never know. And that's back to the consulting. But what we've got to do is show them the best path that they can take based on their purpose. All right. So we'll get started with heart. What I love about this is, if you can imagine really quick, the Kroger of 7 years ago, of 20 years ago, and what it is today, it is night and day. I mean, when I walked in the doors of Bright House and they said, yeah, we just got done doing the purpose for Kroger, and I went, ooh, like it literally put a sour taste in my mouth, because I knew of the Kroger down the street and I knew of some Krogers I'd experienced before. And now the brand has changed considerably. It's taken them time, but it's all goes, funny enough, back to this heart that we designed right at Bright House. So I'll explain really quick how we work a little bit, and then touch on some of the ideas that we had just immediately based on that heart. So what we do at Bright House is, when we're digging in, we want to make that framework, we call it a unifying framework, of how the company is going to then live the purpose. And it's kind of a one-sheet roadmap of, hey, now how do we take action on this? And what are those key pieces that are going to help us do it? So when I go back to the heart, I'll first start at what is at the core, what's at the center. And that is, Kroger's purpose is to feed the human spirit. And when I first started doing some of the activation pieces after I started, the interesting thing was that Kroger was having difficulty for some of their employees understanding what that meant. And so what we were saying to them is, every day you have the chance to uplift millions of people across the US. And what it's hard to put into perspective, but Kroger is gigantic, and we'll get into that in a second. But what's so important is that every relationship, every exchange, every experience for a customer and an employee is a chance to make a huge impact. And so that's what we were trying to say in these 4 words. But what we started to get at is, hey, they needed more, and so the beauty is that Kroger came back to us. So we did some exploration. just a quick glimpse into like, hey, this is how we might approach something. And so these are three different unifying frameworks. And did I think I'd ever say those words in my career? No. But what I can tell you is that the power of what we did on the left unlocked a ton of amazing stuff to come. So they saw this one on the left, of course, on the right, you got a conveyor belt. In the middle, you got something kind of like a menu. But on the left, you've got this heart, and it became a symbol. And that's the thing that I love is when you make something powerful, people can refer to it and then imbue meaning as well as all of the different initiatives within it. And so here they were able to see this symbol of this heart with these ripples and suddenly start to put all of these pieces together in the right order. And they never had that. And this is a gigantic Midwestern company, very humble, very hardworking, but not taking the time to say, hey, let us try and sort it out. So thankfully, Bright House did. So here's the clear one. Here's the one with the right colors and the right proportions and everything that happened later. But you can see very clearly how it's phrased, how it works. Because our purpose is to feed the human spirit, then we lead with this. We will do this. We value. You see the values there. And then you also see some of the promises that they made to both their customers and their employees. That's sounds simple. It can take a lot of time to get that sorted. And I remember having a lot of disagreements with Kroger over the color green, which we later found out somebody hated. But you find those things out, it's just, but what was also fun is pushing them on the colors that actually represented their biggest brands within their portfolio. And so then it became smart to them. So back to the size of Kroger, they have over 500 or close to 500,000 employees. They're one of the largest employers in the US behind Amazon and Walmart. So when you think about impact and scale, that a small shop that I started at, and I made this heart when we were in our old office before we were acquired by BCG, this was the proof. This was the proof to say Bright House can become a part of this family and do something even bigger. And that's the kind of thing that really gets me excited. And then, of course, small little note that I never thought I'd see as well is, I used to do ads and commercials and outdoor, and then suddenly I'm, influencing an embroidery on an apron of 500,000 employees. So if you walk into your nearby Kroger, or you happen to be in the West and you go to Ralph's, or you're in the Carolinas and you go to Harris Teeter, they're all wearing an apron with that heart embroidered on it. And that just goes right back to what we designed. So that's the kind of thing of like, you never know when smart design is going to lead to great results. But we got to have that here. And then you even see it in their Krogies, which is a hilarious thing that Lowe, New York has made, but they're embracing it and it has to be there, because it's now a part of their character. So just a quick one on design there, but I can say that you saw that smattering example earlier on Kroger, and there are a lot of things that we gave them, a lot of ideas, including getting, if you're going to feed the human spirit, you got to stop with the plastic bags. So by 2025 is their goal to be done with plastic bags. Now, of course, Bright House, we'd love to have that sooner, but that's a step in the right direction, based on purpose. All right. So I think time-wise, I'm doing pretty good. We'll go into Mercedes next. So when I heard that we were, this was right after we were acquired by BCG, and somebody said that we we're having a conversation with Mercedes, and that some of our folks are going to have to go out on a boat and meet with the CEO. And I thought, wow, that can't be the big Mercedes, the one out of Stuttgart, that invented the automobile. And it turned out it was. I was thinking more in the like, hey, it might be just the domestic one. But what I love is it led to some amazing things, including going carbon neutral in their car production, both in Europe and all the plants to come. And that's the kind of thing that only purpose can truly start, and also make sure that it's defending those decisions and enabling people to take very smart risks that they know are going to lead to great rewards. And I think that's the thing where when we did the work with them, they knew that they had to do something big, but they just didn't know how to frame it. They didn't know how to get there. And so the next big thing was doing a whole fleet of vehicles that are going to be carbon neutral. And so that's the thing for us when I got to come home months after working on Mercedes to find out that they're actually going to do it and announce it. And I told my kids, I said, hey, you're not going to believe what happened today. I'm like, what? And then I described this situation, and they're like, well, but does that include all the parts? Does it include everything? I was like, yes, everything, carbon neutral. And that's the kind of thing where it's like, okay, so how did they get there? And so that's where sometimes it involves getting in a really great vintage Mercedes and getting out on the Bertha Benz Trail. But that was us saying to Mercedes, hey, we've got to get out there and get immersed in where you came from. And the reason we did that was because we needed to know exactly how it started so we could help from the roots to show them where they can go in the future. And so this is the story of origin that we wrote 3 weeks after that immersion. So we're ripping around on the roads, we're doing interviews, we're meeting all of these executives and getting out in the factories. And coming out of that, we have a writer here named Emily who wrote this story of origin, 3 solid paragraphs with this finale that is just so damn gorgeous. And what I love about it is she bookends it with the facts are famous. And we all know that about Mercedes. We know they invented the automobile, but it's the beauty within how they can become an innovator for the future as opposed to being an innovator of the past. And that's the part that got us the most excited, is that when this was read in Stuttgart to the CEO at the time, Dieter, when he heard it, he said, I can't believe you've gotten to know Mercedes better in 3 weeks than I've known it for 40 years. And he started to tear up. And that's the kind of thing that once you make that kind of impact on somebody, you now have permission to really go into some big ideas. And that's what Bright House is all about. This writing style may seem journalism, may seem, different, but it's eloquence. And that's what started to, really stick. And so with that, we came up with the purpose line for them, first move the world. And so it was through very serious discussions with them and a lot of them saying, oh my gosh, it's got to be bolder. We invented the automobile. It's got to be bigger. It's got to be, and then but it also has to be really short. So it can translate across all of our geographies where we are. So first move the world. Some would like a comma in there, and we've heard all of that. But when we had landed on that line and they said, that's it, we're moving forward, we then had to do a launch with their leaders. And I remember walking by here at Bright House and seeing an art director sitting there on a constellation site trying to buy stars. And I said, what are you doing? Not worried, but just curious. What are you doing? She said, oh, I'm buying stars, and I've got to buy a star per liter because we're trying to make the Mercedes star in the sky, because they firmly believe that that purpose is their timeless North Star. They just happen to be a brand with a star logo. And so it's like, holy, that's freaking awesome. Yes, do it. And let's do it. And then we built this box. And so every leader, when they showed up in this tent for the launch, received their own North Star, personal North Star, that then united and connected with all of the other leaders' stars to make the Mercedes star. And so that's the kind of thing that's definitely out there. I won't lie, but it makes an impact. And it says, it's time to think big. It's time to lift up and stop thinking about, fuel economy or what kind of leather or how can we add some trim to this or sexier wheels. It's time to think big. And it was also through that we had other big ideas. We said, hey, Daimler started in, you had Daimler starting in his greenhouse, thinking about the engine. Well, it's time to take the greenhouse back out there. Like, let's start bringing that to the employees and letting them go into a greenhouse and feel like he did. He would pull the curtains so people wouldn't see in Stuttgart that he was in there tinkering with an engine because that was too alarming at the time. Well, let's bring back that kind of spirit. So we did sketches. These are the greatest marker comps, but what I love is that the idea is there, and that's what matters. This next thing, before I hit play, and hopefully it'll play well for across the Zoom, but what I love about this is that their CFO, of all people, their financial officer, was the one that hit us the hardest and said, you know what? It's great that we've done these inventions over the last few years, and we keep, more fuel economy and we've enhanced the look of the car, but we really haven't done anything serious since we invented the automobile. I was like, okay, lay down the gauntlet. So we came up with this film to inspire invention and reinvigorate the spirit within them. They are the leading automobile manufacturer still, but as we all know, between the different brands like Lucid and Tesla, that there are people coming up and stealing some of that share of who's the inventor, who's the innovator, and that's where this came up. And so we had the idea here of, hey, you take that blank canvas and you turn it into the drape that we see at all the car shows that reveals the next thing. And how do we use that to then inspire people to think differently about what could be under it? So I'll just hit play and we'll see if that works.
First, imagine the extraordinary. First, second guess the possible. First, redefine the limits. First, move the world.
So this film was used to send around and share with internal employees to get them to think differently, and also tying it very quickly to the purpose. What I love in there are historical moments. I mean, you can see the original carriage, the original car. You can see the gull wing. You can see their racing highlights and milestones. But what I love is at the end, it's about shifting the focus and changing who they can be, and not going too far. So that's the kind of thing that we love to see. Of course, when we had the idea, we didn't know how complex it would be to make that. But what we do love is that they took it to heart. They really wanted to make that happen. And so we ended up finding a vendor that actually worked on Spider-Man to create that fabric and make it move as realistic as possible. All right. So from Mercedes to a food distributor, it's not every day you get to go between those two. What's interesting about Cisco, when I say it out loud, a lot of people are like, oh, you mean the tech company? I'm like, oh man, that's unfortunate that they sound alike, but they're very different. And so we worked with Cisco out of Houston, Texas. And what we really enjoyed about this is that it was a different kind of challenge. So on the other two projects I just shared with you, we wrote the purpose line. In this case, Cisco's CEO had just arrived from CVS, where he was in operations prior to getting this role at Cisco. And he was a huge cynic of purpose. And that's another big thing that we face at times, is that, sometimes the biggest cynics become the biggest believers. And that's something that's really powerful to watch, that transformation. And so while he was at CVS, he saw, as they made that stand to say, hey, we're going to get rid of tobacco and pull that out of our stores and lose close to $5 billion, that there's a reason for it, and we know we'll be rewarded for it. And he got to see that firsthand. So that led him to Cisco, and he becomes the CEO. And when he comes on board, he says, you know what, we're going to write our own purpose, and then we are going to need help activating it. So that there's a disclaimer there, because they wrote this purpose and it's very long and hard for me to remember. Even as I stare at it, it's long, but it's beautiful and it has a lot of great thoughts in it. It's just a little tricky to try and, say off the tip of your tongue. So what we loved about it was this was a different kind of challenge. It was hey, you're not coming up with a purpose. We've already got it. Now, what do we do with it? And so here we immediately started to see some of the things that could help us to not only brand it, kind of like you saw in the Kroger work, a little bit a glimpse of it in the Mercedes work. But what we loved is that it was a matter of okay, now what do we do with it? And so the first thing right out of the gate, we said, well, geez, you got this leaf growing off your Y there. Why do you have that? And they're like, well, we don't know. We just got this logo and we've never done anything with it. It's like, oh, well, there's a bold opportunity to take advantage of. So we jumped in and started to create different elements based on that leaf. And how we kept hearing the CEO talking about growth. And I was like, well, geez, it's inherent and it's also branded on everything you've got, from boxes to uniforms to trucks. Let's embrace that. So then back to the Kroger example of hey, now it's time to show you how you use that leaf, how you remember it as a symbol, and then you can start to talk about it. So less about just seeing this one design but starting to understand how the pieces connect. And that's what we really enjoy seeing, is that, hey, you've got a purpose. It's foundational here in this case, and everything else is growing from it. And if you do it right, it's going to really take off. So that's where we started to create a whole identity based on that. And so then we started to explore different things, like even the font. And what was amazing to watch is a company yearning for, oh my gosh, the responses were it's non-corporate. And wow, these colors are really fun and fresh. And, that was because a Portfolio Center grad, Mary Elizabeth, who works here, pushed on that. That was her going, you know what? I heard somebody say they don't like their blue. Let's change it and let's adopt some other things and then start to really build off of it, which we did. And that's the thing that I really love is that we have the permission to really push brands because we're at a higher level. So as opposed to a design shop, an ad agency, you're in the marketing sector. We are above that, working in the purpose area, which is working with the CEO, the COO, head of comms, all of them to say, let's think bigger, let's push on this. So when we brought in the Bobby Jones font, they're like, yes, please, let's do that. The other big thing that you'll notice really quick in the food illustrations is that Mary Elizabeth had the great idea that like, hey, if everything's at the heart of it, and how do we show this kind of the core, let's make all of our food illustrations more of kind of a bisection of it. And so we started to do that. And what I loved is that, she started thinking about like, well, avocados are hard to read on the outside, so let's actually show it from the inside. So we created different animations and other pieces, but it was nice that we could also really push up the language to sync up with it. So these kinds of things, we built a lot of those. We did a lot of elements that would help them really roll it out to their workforce. We have other more ambitious things for them in the future, including an art program that could be on the sides of their trucks, which we think would be great. And then there are other things that, just help the workforce start to see it and see that it's, purpose can be invigorating, and it can also help shift focus at times. So we created a purpose film. This one's on our website. I won't try and stream, a thing with audio that's, got a lot of dialogue in it. But if you look on our site and our case studies, you'll see this. What I love about it is that while we were having the conversations, they were talking about how they're really pushing hard, both in diversity and inclusion. And so the conversation started to lend itself towards, well, geez, you're all about delivering food every day, to people all over the world. Now, what's the big moment? The big moment is that you're delivering that food to provide consistency so restaurants can create these meals that then people share. So why not you become the brand known for sharing a seat at the table? And so we started, that phrase really stuck. They're like, oh my gosh, seat at the table. Yes, we got to have that. And so then the film, when you watch it, really highlights these great stories of when their employees have gone above and beyond, and it's totally in sync with their purpose. And what we like to see is that it's already been there. They've already been doing that. Now it's a time to really highlight and frame it correctly, so people know that like when we say this, longer purpose line that I can't say out loud or remember, that's what we mean. That's the emotional connection. So we always say it's the push button play for purpose. But having a film is one thing. And then here we also created this vignette that allowed people to see kind of a deeper dive into it too, which we really liked. So you'll see both of those on our site. And then the next thing is, it's tough to come to you today and try and capture all that Bright House does in a short period of time, because we do quite a bit. And we also have been very fortunate over the last few years to work with a ton of brands. And that's helped us even build and have an office both in Berlin and Paris. So some of the brands you're looking at here, like Avril, Deutsche Bahn, Novo Nordisk, are being worked on by our other offices. And so what we love to see is that like the range is there. We have tons of enthusiasm for the brands we get to work on, but then it keeps getting us more work. So what's cool is you have somebody working at North Face who then leaves and the word gets out, and then somebody at Under Armour picks that up and brings us in. Or we just got done, or we're actually continuing to work with a brand called Tapestry, which is the umbrella company over Kate Spade, Coach, and Stuart Weitzman. So, we're working in luxury brands, we're working in IG, we're working with, mobile clients, healthcare. And then what I love is, the Mercedes work that we did for Mercedes-Benz cars quickly led to work with Daimler trucks and buses, which is actually even bigger if you look at the numbers. But what I love to see is that, the variety. So it all goes back to the beginning for me is like, hey, I really wanted to work on a number of different brands, push myself to do different kinds of work. And here comes all this variety. And, each day I come in and you just never know what you're going to start working on next, which is great. And then Hank brought up earlier, that we're known as the, original home of purpose. So we started over 25 years ago, doing purpose work. And at the time, it was an incredibly fluffy thing. I won't lie. I remember, when I freelanced, which would have been 9 years ago at Bright House, there weren't real numbers yet. And that's the thing, was that a lot of companies kept their work close to the chest. And it's unfortunate that they did that, because then came the next wave of, I want to see that company do this, this, this. And so a lot of companies have had to play catch up. A lot of companies are now very public with their purpose just in the last few years. And then the beauty is that the numbers are there, that not only the employees want to see it, but the customers want to see it. And they're making decisions based on purpose. So that's huge for us. And we've done that with P&G and a number of other clients, where even in consumer goods, all the way down to that small decision at the store is leading back to purpose. So that's been powerful for us. And then the next thing is that, we're a little less known for these next couple things I'll highlight. But what I love is that when we get to push ourselves, and do ideations, to come in and lead workshops with companies, that we can have a really great effect on and influence some really big projects. So we recently got to help, shape the thinking of a space that's 4 times larger than Central Park. So what do they do there? And then there we are leading a workshop to help push that. The other big one is branding. You saw some examples of purpose branding, as we call it, but it's branding nonetheless. I mean, Cisco has gone out with our toolkit and is now using it all across their stuff. So if you're looking at social media, you'll see Cisco using it in recruiting campaigns. They're using it in different types of announcements and commitments, and that's great for us. We love doing that, and we're building more and more in our design department, which is great. And then the next one is bold commitments. This is something that stems out of the work that you do based on purpose. And so that's where those 2 that I showed in Mercedes was, hey, what are we going to do now that we have this line, first move the world? What do we do with it? And what is that, what makes it bold? What's going to help move the world in that case? And that happened to be going carbon neutral in their manufacturing. And there are a number of other things we put on the table. We'll just see what they do next. But that's the kind of thing of, back to consulting, giving them the best ideas possible in the time you're working with them. And then, at times we see how it rolls out. So like the Kroger work took years to get there. So like, I remember they didn't want to put anything out there with their purpose line publicly. And then now it's on their website. Now they've got that framework. You walk into the store, there's this decal on the floor with our heart as well. Those are kinds of things that are changing because people are getting more and more interested in trying to become more public with it. And then the last one is, of course, film. So we do a lot of different films, whether it's documentaries, we showed you an example of a purpose film plus an innovation film. We do a lot of different series and vignettes. So, for me, coming from an ad background and being very visual, I loved getting to do commercials and the production side of it. But what I like here is that we really are always pushing ourselves. So when I joined, we were the place that kind of cut whatever footage the client gave us and put a beautiful script with it and the song, and that was it. And it's like, no, we can do original shooting. So we now have 2 shooters in the house, a motion designer. We have a whole production arm that's gotten larger and larger with multiple producers. So film is a very important tool, because no matter how eloquent the CEO is or somebody in comms, they still need to be able to refer to it. And for employees, we've heard even companies like BCG, we did a film for them, and they watch the film, and occasionally we'll talk to people and they'll be like, yeah, I played it this morning. Like, it gives me such a boost, to come in and see it. And then another person the other day told me at a client site, like, oh gosh, I watched the film again and it made me cry, but I love it. I just can't get enough. And that's the kind of thing that we'd love to have, is that how do we arm them with those right tools, and then make sure that the meaning plus, of course, all the emotion can still come through even after we're gone. All right. So I think I stayed inside my window as best as possible. What I definitely want to do is, I've got my contact info here. I want to go into Q&A if that's possible, and then, see what kind of questions you guys have for us. And then I can, one thing I will throw out there before I forget is that we are at the moment looking for a design director. So somebody with years of experience doing design and building systems and knowing all of that, and can definitely come in here and shape not only the work we do for our clients, but also our own internal brand. So that's one role that's open, I believe, still on our website. And then the next one is that we just posted a senior art director role. So we definitely want to get the word out there that, hey, it's a lovely place. I totally forgot to announce that I'm broadcasting from Ponce City Market, so not too far away from you guys. But we have a lovely office, tons of warm, fuzzy, great folks, smart. And I think the big thing for us is, we're very flexible. We've been very fortunate to push ourselves during the pandemic, the unfortunate circumstances there, but we are continuing to do great work despite all of that. So we'd love to have the right folks come join us if that's of interest to you. So.
One of the most beautiful spaces out there, Jeff. That is a gorgeous office. All right, let's open up the Q&A. Jump in, guys.
Perfect.
Hi, Jeff. I have a quick question. You mentioned that you are above advertising and consulting. Actually, I do not know anything about consulting and how actually it is applied to the new market. Can you explain me that better? How you compare yourself with advertising, or how you separate yourself of advertising?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a ton of different frameworks, and if I had this diagram ready at the ready, I'd be able to show you that, like, we see purpose as sitting above everything. So if you're at Mercedes, the CEO is saying, this is our purpose, first move the world, and everybody's, hey, that's what we believe in. Down a couple, notches down. So you got purpose way up high. Then there's a portion of their business, you're going to have HR, you're going to have communications or marketing, you're going to have manufacturing, you're going to have all these different divisions, and marketing is one of those, but it sits under purpose. So the reason I said it is that we influence those things that are higher level, which gives us permission to push the brand, because the brand guidelines are for marketing most of the time. And that's where I love that we can come in and kind of go, hey, I see your Cisco brand guidelines, but now let's make them better, because we're talking about, this is the vehicle to, share with the world purpose. And that's the kind of thing that I love to do. So when we worked with a number of different companies, Nestle and some beer brands, some soft drink brands. And when we do, we are advising the marketing people on how they can do it. And we've shaped strategy with them. We've coached them on the ad ideas at times, but it's for them to make, and it's for us to bring our thinking to, but not for us to make stuff that's exactly in line with marketing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it really sounds.
At the end of the day, we're trying not to steal. We don't want to steal. Agencies do what they do. Design shops do what they do. We do what we do. So we're just trying to clarify the space, because we've gone into a lot of rooms where we've had some, how would you say, some marketing folks that are a little upset because they're worried we're there to be the next agency, and we're like, no. We're just here to help. So it's always interesting to learn that. But I'm glad you asked that.
No, actually, it sounds really great, and I'm come from an advertising background also, and yeah, that sounds like the dream. Really pursue and shift and mold a brand to a direction for the future. And yeah, thank you for explaining.
Absolutely.
I have a question for you, Jeff.
Yeah.
My name's Bethany, and I'm in the Furman Master's Program at the Portfolio Center in Miami Ad. And I'm just kind of curious as to your thoughts on not pigeonholing yourself, especially as a student. I'm in my 5th of 6th quarters right now. And so I'm just curious, how do you foresee staying true to yourself as a designer, especially as you're working through school and trying to build up that portfolio, staying true to the values that really drive you, like purpose and meaning in your work, but also pushing yourself to still explore things that you don't know about yet and explore kind of avenues that are not comfortable to you. I'd just love to hear your feedback on that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I can tell you one thing I've learned about in my career is I'm a little stubborn. And so I worked at J. Walter Thompson for a while, and they would tell me that I had to bill 100% on the Marine Corps. And doing Marine Corps recruiting is great. It was very neat and rewarding, but I also knew I could do more. And so I fought hard to work on a Norfolk Southern when they had the train client, to do that, because I had passed a planner, a strategist in the office, and said, "What are you up to?" And she said, "Oh my gosh, I just wrote this amazing brief where we're not going to feature the train." I went, "Holy, sign me up. I want to come up with ideas for that." And so that, me syncing up with her and us going to the client meeting that I had to fight very carefully to get into, helped me understand the importance of strategy. It was at that moment I went, "Oh my gosh, if you show up with a strategist and you present the strategy and then the creative together in unison, my God, it's a slam dunk." I mean, like, the client's going, "Yep, I believe in the strategy. I've already signed off on that." And now you've got creative that backs that. Oh, way to go. And so it was that kind of thing that helped me understand that at times I got to fight to get that variety. And then the other big one was a moment where I worked on a nonprofit there. And once again, talk about, I already pissed people off doing Norfolk Southern. I pissed even more people off doing a nonprofit for Foundation Rwanda to put students in school. And so what I wanted to do was, gosh, if I can help people born of genocide, get into school, absolutely, I need to help them in any way I can. And so I did some, commercials and other pieces to help support that. And what's amazing is I was fought to the death to not work on it. People told me time and time again, "Don't work on that. Don't touch that. Whatever you do, don't go near it. That you're going to get in trouble with the timesheet police and everybody else." And so I said, "Fine, I'll do it in my magic hours." And then funny enough, it was the one piece the whole year that got, some awards and recognition. And then funny enough, everybody's like, "Oh man, way to go." And you're like, glad I was stubborn. Like, I'm glad I kind of just stuck with it, because I knew I needed it for myself. I knew I could help. And back to the whole thing of purpose, I had a skill set. There was a need in the world. And at that intersection, I could do something good. And that's what made me feel good. And I wasn't doing it for awards. I was doing it for myself. I mean, I literally had to go out and beg favors of a photographer. I worked all weekend doing Photoshop, which I'm not the best at, to make a piece that I knew could resonate and get more attention for this thing. Not awards. And that's the difference, is that, like, a lot of people they don't want you to have variety because it makes it easier on them. Like, if you think about it, it makes sense from a business standpoint. I want you to work on that thing. And I really want you to work, like, I don't want you to dabble around because I don't know if you're giving your attention to that thing. So that's the thing you got to find, is a place that embraces variety. And also at times make them make the opportunity yourself. And I've had to do that. I mean, that Foundation Rwanda thing was a guy in the office saying, "Hey, I've got a cousin who runs this nonprofit. Anybody want to help?" And I said, yes. And
Awesome.
so those moments don't always happen. Trust me, I've chased after nonprofits left and right because I love it. But that's when I came here and I'm like, gosh, I can work at a place where we do some nonprofit work at times. From the ACLU, I just got out of a meeting where we're helping Wounded Warrior Project, seeing the work we're doing. I'm helping We Love Buford Highway, but I also do client work. And we got to respect the balance, but we also need to, we know we need that. It helps us.
Makes sense. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Of course.
Hi, Jeff. This is Mayanti from the Med School Sri Lanka Social Media Bootcamp. Do you think that?
I have a question. Sometimes when you guys rode around in the Mercedes, and when you have to think about purpose, is that a combination of? I mean, when you talk about in user experience, it's a combination of qualitative, quantitative. There's also strategy, but I feel like it seems like your team takes that to a different level. What types of exercises or techniques do you guys do to try to get to read in between the lines?
No, that's a great one. So what's interesting, and I didn't highlight it very well earlier because I just didn't know how much time I'd have, or how long I'd take. The Mercedes thing was fascinating in that story of origin, because no one at Mercedes knew that there were two people making the car engine at the same time. So what's shocking is you've got Carl Benz making a car engine in his place in Cannstatt, and then you've got Daimler in his place in Stuttgart. And they're making the engine at the same time. And the first person to take it out on the road was Bertha Benz, Carl Benz's wife, decides to take her two sons to go see her mother in the carriage. I mean, good Lord, talk about brave, and jumps in the damn thing. And if you're in Germany, they definitely give her a lot of respect. But what's powerful is the movies and everything about it. But even people within the Mercedes leadership didn't even know that, like fully, like did not understand that. Like it wasn't until Deutsche Bank in the 1930s recommended those two brands merge. So you had Mercedes over here, you had Carl Benz or Benz and Sons, and they finally said, if you guys don't merge, you're going to go out of business. So that's the kind of thing is like, no one takes the time sometimes to dig back to the roots and figure out like, oh my gosh, we've got this powerful story. We also understand how there were two inventors at the same time. Like all of those things help boost it. So you're asking, how did we get there? We talked to one of the people from Mercedes and said, we need a deep immersion. We're coming to Stuttgart. We're going to be there for, I think at least a week, maybe 8 days. And we said, we're coming. We need interviews. We need to get out there. We need to see both of these locations. And they put that all together. So that's one case. Other times we go out to site visits. So back to that park, it's 2 former Air Force bases within the Middle East that are going to be developed into this giant green park. But we get out there. We got to do that. And then at times we'll lead a workshop. So even while we were in Stuttgart, we were at the Mercedes Museum doing a discussion, pulling insights from the people that attended. Same thing when we did the thing in the Middle East. We had insights that we brought from luminaries, which is a deeper thing, but we bring these experts in and we brought the insights and put them on posters in the room to then reference and bring the thinking up. So people weren't just like, oh, I think the place should have a water fountain. It's like, no. Let's think bigger than that. And let's start to shape this. So it depends on the client, and it also depends on how much time they'll give us to do that. But we always have to have interviews. We always need to dig into the archives. And then we also need to have workshops, because we always say to the client, this isn't for us to live. It's for you. So we need to make sure that it best represents you. And like purpose should be the thing you're always trying to achieve, but you also need to see like some of the best of the brand in it. And that's why we want to make sure we get out there and really push for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, Jeff. I'll try again. My mic was quiet. Do
Okay.
you think, I'm from Social Media Bootcamp Sri Lanka.
Hmm.
Do you think collaboration on a global level is a way forward for designers to kind of improve the world?
Absolutely. Great question. And I think, yes, I mean, collaboration what helps push us, so like inside Bright House, we have a yes and culture. It's a very improv thing to say, but it makes a difference, like today, thankfully Katie's here, and we just had a session right before this where we were sharing work amongst each other. And in that session, we came up with another great idea based on the work we thought we were done with, so like, it's always in those moments that somebody else might find a spark and it helps elevate the thinking. And that's that kind of thing where we collaborate. Back to the word collaboration, you have to let your guard down and understand that you're in it to do the best things. And that's when you can truly make great work. And that's the difference, back to me being a little stubborn at times. It's like, I know I got to find the people that are going to help me do better work. And thankfully I've made it, I'm here. But that's the kind of thing where collaboration is going to help you, whether it's social, whether it's outdoor, whether it's you never know what the idea could be and what that could really, elevate, depending on what you're trying to work on. But I absolutely, especially in design, getting another set of eyes on a font, color palette. I mean, that Cisco thing, I don't think I'm supposed to give a shout out to somebody that's a Circus grad, but we brought in a guy who's a very well-known design director here in town, Blake, and Blake came in and freelanced for us on a project that helped Cisco. Did I have Bobby Jones font in my brain? No. Was I going to get there? No. But I brought in an expert, so Blake helped us get there. And that's the kind of thing we want to make sure of, is that like, how do you help each other? And then those food illustrations, collaboration, I was doodling. I mean, I was sketching in my little note thing on my phone and shooting those to Mary Elizabeth. And she's going, oh gosh, what is this? Is that an avocado? So that's where we started to realize, oh gosh, we got to cut that in half and show the core. Otherwise you don't know what it is. So those are the moments you got to have, and you got to bake in some time for that.
Thank you.
Great question.
I have a question too. I'm a fifth quarter copywriting student. I'm doing my first internship right now, and you mentioned kind of purpose sitting above everything else. But as an intern who, eventually I'll be a junior, you're kind of at the bottom of everything. So I'm wondering if you have any advice for kind of getting these like bigger purpose-driven ideas through to a point where people like look at them and pay attention to them, where you might be able to start steering things in a good direction from kind of the back of the pack?
Yeah, at the end of the day, like good thinking can come from anywhere. And the other big thing is, hopefully the place you're interning at respects that. But the other big thing is finding an example for yourself that's going to excite you and where you can do that. So can you find a strategist you can partner with and you do that? Or do you do a lot of research and work with a writer? And sometimes it's an art, designer, art director paired with a writer, and the two of you do it, but you do it like you're doing the strategy and then the creative. That kind of example will help you understand like what it takes to go get that strategy nailed down, to then show that to a client and then come back with the creative. Take those steps. That's the other big thing I probably didn't hit on here, but like it took a number of iterations with Mercedes to get that line nailed. It wasn't like we just showed up and pulled the curtain and said, "Yep, there it is, first move of the world." Like, trust me, it was a lot of pushback. And I remember a lot of frustrated people going, "God, I can't get the line. What is it?" And then we get the line, but then we had the CFO giving us, grief, going, "Gosh, we got to be bolder, and I need to push this crew, and we're not being innovative enough." And that's when I got a brief. I started on the project, then I moved on to another project, and then I had a guy here go, "Jeff, read this brief. We're about to get on a flight together from New York back to Atlanta. Come up with some ideas, and we'll talk when we land." It's like, geez, okay. So we came up with I had that drape idea. I started thinking car shows and stuff. And I was like, oh, they always pull the drape off. But what if the drape doesn't come? And then I get off the plane and I'm like, oh, I got this idea with this drape. And he's like, oh man, what if it doesn't come off and it just molds? And so that's the kind of thing that you got to have that collaboration, but you got to base it on something. And that's the hardest part. Like I've done a number of projects where you don't have the brief. They're painful. You lose all confidence. So that's the kind of thing where I'd love for you to be able to have that within wherever you're working, or as a separate project. What do you do in your magic hours and say, hey, let me make something for somebody? It could be fast food, it could be whatever, but as long as it's based on a strong strategy that you either do or you work with somebody and you jam on it, and then that will help you feel like you're being heard, but also that you're getting that kind of at bat, you're getting tested, from a purpose space. And then you'll be able to like see it in your projects. Once you unlock that wheel, if it's a wheel, probably is a circle, but like once you unlock that, you'll never see projects the same. You'll go, gosh, I need a brief. I need this. I need, and that just makes you a stronger creative.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we're getting close to time. Does anybody have a last question?
Jeff, just to share with them a little bit how big a company like Cisco is. I was sitting thinking, if I'm not mistaken, Cisco is the largest food service distributor in the world, and that you're working on.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, scale of some of the clients we get to work with is massive. I mean, I don't know what the workforce looks like right now at Mercedes, but it's gigantic. And Daimler Trucks combined, the fact that we went right off Mercedes-Benz cars, I did some of that work, and then I jumped into Daimler Trucks. It's amazing. I mean, then you get out and you start filming in these, warehouses or, in different locations, and then you're there and you're like, oh my gosh, you're getting to meet them face to face. But what I love to see is that, seeing purpose start to come to life, and then also the big reward is getting to hear even a couple of years later what they're doing with it, or going online and going, oh my gosh, they're really embracing it. So purpose is a powerful tool, but it's also something that it takes belief. And then once you see people truly believe in it, like the CEO at Kroger was highly reluctant, it was actually a BCG framework that showed him that he will never get over the hump in the 2x2 to be a Publix or an HEB unless he truly does purpose. So funny enough, we weren't even owned by BCG at the time when they proved to him, you're not going to get there. Like, it's never going to happen. And he went, oh my gosh, how do I get this? How do I get purpose? And then they just went, oh, we recommend Bright House. So that's when we did the work. And then thankfully for years, we've done off and on work with Kroger, but that's the kind of thing. Same with Cisco. The film you guys see on our website and the case studies you'll see, is great. It's American because during COVID, we weren't able to get out there and do an international version. We are now working on that. Like the success of that film has led them to say, oh my gosh, now please go make an international one. But yeah, they're very big. In fact, back to Cisco's size, they were trying to buy US Foods and the government blocked it because they said they would have a monopoly on food distribution.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And you've called out a couple people today that I think it would be great for our guys in Dallas to know about is Mary Elizabeth and Callie Bibi over there and Kathy Carlisi are all alums of the school.
Yeah,
And Katie Marquez too.
exactly. And Katie, who
Graduate.
in my view is over here, but yes, absolutely. So we're very fortunate that the portfolio, the Miami Ad School connections continue to come back and do great things for Bright House. So Mary Elizabeth joined us as a intern. So I can always say that our interns are an amazing thing here. She joined us as an intern and then quickly became an art director and is now a senior art director. So she's been here for a few years. Katie just joined us as a writer, and we're so glad to have her. And then the other one that you mentioned earlier, Callie. Callie, was a creative director years ago at Richards Group, worked in New York for a while, and then came here to Bright House and has joined us as a CD, and then quickly became a group creative director. So she's been actually the heading up all of that tapestry work. So she's working closely with Coach and Kate Spade and Stuart Weitzman. It's been just amazing to watch. Like I'm watching from a distance, and every time I see the work, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's better than I thought it could be. So that's been awesome. And then we've had a couple others, in the past that are from Portfolio Center, like Kathy. And Kathy, I remember when I was about to join Bright House full time, and I talked to somebody, was very, very sweet kind of legend in the ad business here in Atlanta, and they said, "Oh my gosh, you're going to work for the smartest person, one of the smartest creatives in Atlanta." I was like, "Absolutely." And I've been very, very lucky to travel around the globe with Kathy and watch her present. And every time I do, I'm in awe. But that's the kind of place that we have these great leaders. But the other thing I was thinking about earlier, is it Chris? You were saying that you're interning. Oh, the names went away in my view. But Chris, your question was great because you're saying, hey, I'm a junior and, do people hear me kind of thing. And that's the thing at Bright House I've always enjoyed watching. I mean, when I joined, we were 16 people. Atlanta is now over 80, thanks to our growth and the reputation we've got. And then of course we've added Berlin, which is over 20. We've got Paris, which is at 10 now. So like you get over 100, but the thing is like, there's no hierarchy. Like I was just in a meeting earlier with a CEO, our CEO, plus a managing director. We're all just chatting. It's that comfort that is key, because if you're not comfortable, you're not going to say the thing that might actually change the work to be better. And that's the thing that I love about this place. We always, and everyone that walks in the door, I say it as soon as possible. I say, you are going to shape Bright House. And it's the truth. Like I can't do it all. I need you, I need you to help shape it, whether you're making an email, whether you're building a thing, whether you're out on a film production, or we're just coming up with riffing and doodling. It's not a judgment zone. It's a matter of like, how do we come up with big ideas that push the world? So, last endorsement on the careers page, please go. I think it's Think Bright House or bcgbrighthouse.com, either one. So bcgbrighthouse.com. And then you'll see it in the menu, you'll see careers, scroll in there, check out the description. And then also just be on the lookout. You might be in a place in your time right now in school, it's not right for you, but keep us in mind. I mean, that was the thing. Hank and I had the conversation a couple of weeks ago, and it was just a matter of like, I'd love for more people to know that Bright House is an option, that purpose is important, and that, please definitely stay in touch, and, love to see what you guys are up to.
Yeah.
And one day soon we'll all be in person. So we won't, be inside these rectangles. We'll be just in a room. It'll be great. So thank you, Hank, Pippa,
Jeff,
Stephanie,
thank you.
and all of you for your time. Really, this was wonderful. I really appreciate getting to share. And of course, there's tons more work to share, but check out our case studies And then hit me up if you ever have any questions.
Yeah. Hey, before you go, one quick thing. Yeah, a little story you were telling Stephanie and I right at the beginning.
Yeah.
I would love for you to share that, because we talk about with the students about network values all the time. And I just think that that's such a great network value. And I'll let you share the little story of how you got your start.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Well, this is a wild one. So one other thing that's like a nugget of wisdom is, you know, you never know who you connect with, where that'll lead to. So funny enough, just before this today, a couple hours ago, somebody shot me an email who happens to be a teacher there at Miami Ad School, Brian Dodd. And Brian is actually the person who got me my start. So I sent my portfolio, which, you know, now would be an email or a link, but back in the day, you sent a tangible thing. So, you know, 20 years ago, you shipped something, and I sent a very heavy handmade portfolio made of plexiglass and did the whole thing. And I shipped it to Gray, and Brian Dodd saw it and he said, "Oh my gosh, this has got some really cool potential in here. I think it'd be great." So he called me, and that's what got my start at Gray. And so the thing is, I've kept up with him ever since. Like, you know, he shot me a note to wish me the best with the session today and said he couldn't make it. But you never know who you're going to meet along your journey. And all I can say is stay in touch with people, let them know that you're hungry and excited to do the kind of work you want to do. And that will pay off. Because the thing is, back to my stubbornness, you got to stick to what you know. And I watched a lot of people go off, become telecom people. They're now yoga instructors or police officers. So I just got to say, mix it up, have fun out there, and it'll pay off. And that's the kind of thing that I want to see you guys all do. And thanks again to Brian Dodd for being so amazing and seeing my portfolio. Thank heavens.
Thanks, Jeff. Amazing. Thank you for being with us today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Appreciate what you guys do for us.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, take care, everyone.